There's a kind of suffering so quiet, so invisible that most people don't even recognize it as pain. It doesn't leave bruises. It doesn't scream. It doesn't even look like abuse, but it stays with you, sometimes for decades. It's the pain of being ignored, not hated, not attacked, just unsehen. And if you were that child, the one who was emotionally invisible, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You remember how you learned to shrink your needs, silence your voice, and become acceptable by disappearing. And the world called you well-behaved. But inside you were starving. Starving for attention, for validation, for someone to look at you and say, I see you. You matter. That pain, that's what we're here to explore. Because it doesn't just disappear when you grow up. It becomes the architecture of how you think, how you love, how you exist. At first glance, the ignored child seems fine. They're not disruptive. They don't act out. They often appear mature, independent, even wise beyond their years. But that's the mask. The truth is, they're performing stability to avoid abandonment. They're managing the emotional temperature of the room. They become excellent at reading the needs of others because no one ever prioritized theirs. And here's where it gets deeply philosophical. What happens to a human being who learns, from the beginning, that their presence is optional, that their emotions are inconvenient? Do they begin to see themselves as real, or do they become fragments of what they think others want? When a child is ignored, they don't just suffer emotionally, they undergo an ontological crisis. They start to question their own existence. If no one responds to my needs, do I even exist in the eyes of the world?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Let's take a step back. Imagine a cat, yes, a cat who cries at the door. It's not in pain. It's not hungry. It just wants to be noticed. And if no one responds, it stops meowing. It curls up and sleeps. But the silence doesn't mean peace. It means resignation. The same thing happens to a child. When they're ignored long enough, they stop expressing emotion, not because they're okay, but because they've concluded that their feelings are irrelevant. That conclusion becomes a blueprint. They carry it into friendships, relationships, workplaces. They become the helper, the fixer, the overachiever. But underneath it all is a desperate hope. Maybe if I'm useful enough, I'll be loved. And here's the tragedy: this strategy works. The world rewards them for being low maintenance. But inside, there's still that child at the door, wondering when someone will finally come. And now we reach the philosophical heart of the matter. If your identity is built on being unnoticed, how do you reclaim yourself without losing the love you've worked so hard to earn? That's the paradox. The ignored child grows into the adult who fears visibility as much as they crave it. They want to be chosen, but they also fear what might happen if they're truly seen. Because to be seen is to risk rejection. And rejection, when you've spent your whole life trying to be safe, feels like death. So they stay in the shadows, successful, competent, detached, but not alive. They haven't practiced asking for what they need. They don't even know what their needs are. They become strangers to themselves. And the path back, it's not linear. It's not soft. It requires unlearning everything they believed about love, worth, and identity. So let me ask you a question that might change your life if you're brave enough to answer it. When did you first learn to hide your needs? Not in theory, not intellectually. I mean really. What was the moment you realized it was safer to be silent than to be honest? What did it cost you then? And what is it still costing you now? Because until you face that moment, you're not living, you're performing. And here's the hard truth. No amount of adult success, intelligence, or praise can fill the void left by childhood invisibility. That emptiness isn't healed by doing more. It's healed by being more, by giving yourself the attention, the care, the validation that no one else knew how to give. You don't heal from being ignored by waiting to be noticed. You heal by finally noticing yourself. Rebuilding identity after emotional invisibility. When you grow up emotionally invisible, something fundamental goes missing, not just love, not just support, but reflection. You never got to see yourself mirror in the eyes of another. You never had someone say, "Yes, I see that feeling. It's real. It makes sense." You're allowed to have it. And so, bit by bit, you stop trusting your internal world. You stop believing your feelings were valid at all. And without that reflection, you don't develop a stable sense of self. You become whoever the room needs you to be. With your parents, you are quiet. At school, you were perfect. With friends, you were funny. But at the end of the day, when the lights go out and the performance ends, you're left with a terrifying question. Who am I when no one is watching? This is the psychological ghost of the ignored child. It's the sense that your identity is not anchored in your being, but in your function. You start to confuse love with utility. You think people like you because of what you do, how helpful you are, how agreeable, how consistent, rather than who you are. And this creates a strange kind of prison. You feel like you can never stop performing. You can never fall apart. You can never say, "I need help," because doing so risks the one thing you've built your identity around, being easy to love. But love that depends on your silence, your sacrifice, your disappearance isn't love. It's a transaction. And the moment you stop delivering, you fear you'll be abandoned all over again. So you stay small. You stay useful. And you call it loyalty or maturity or responsibility. But deep down, it's fear. So how do we begin to rebuild the mirror that was never there? How do we start to see ourselves clearly when no one ever taught us how? The answer isn't as poetic as we might hope. It starts with radical self-honesty. It starts with sitting in silence, not to numb out, but to listen in. You begin asking questions most people avoid. What do I actually feel right now? What do I want? Not what's expected of me, but what I want. What am I pretending not to need in order to feel safe? These questions are terrifying. They force you to confront the layers of performance you've wrapped around your soul. But once you begin peeling them back, you start to find something real underneath, something fragile, something beautiful, something you. And that, more than any external validation, is where healing begins. It's also where the resistance shows up. Because identity reconstruction is not a peaceful journey. It's a demolition site. You start realizing that much of your adult life was built on the survival strategies of a wounded child. The job you chose, the relationships you tolerated, the boundaries you never set, they were all designed to keep you invisible enough to avoid rejection. And when you see that, really see it, it breaks your heart. You grieve not just for the childhood you didn't have, but for the adulthood that was built around that emptiness. But grief is necessary. It's not the end, it's the release. You can't reclaim what's yours until you mourn what you lost. And the most precious thing you lost wasn't time, it was yourself. So I'll ask you again, and this time slower. Who are you when no one needs anything from you? Who are you when you stop trying to be helpful, or lovable, or impressive? Can you sit with that version of yourself? Even if they feel raw and unfinished, can you offer them the kindness you were never offered? Because that's the mirror you've been waiting for. Not someone else's approval, but your own attention. Your own willingness to say, "I see you. I believe you." You don't have to earn your place anymore. This is how we start to break the spell. Not by fixing the past, but by becoming the reflection we never had. And once you do that, once you learn to see yourself clearly, the world begins to shift. Not because it changes, but because you do. Transforming childhood invisibility into unshakable presence. There comes a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when you realize the silence you once used to protect yourself can now be turned into something else entirely. A signal to others, a signal to yourself, a signal that says, "I'm here now, fully, unapologetically." And this is the final transformation of the ignored child, not to become loud for the sake of noise, but to become present in a way that can no longer be overlooked. When you've lived your life in emotional exile, your return to yourself is nothing short of revolutionary. You begin to speak, not to be heard, but because you finally have something to say. You learn to set boundaries, not to punish others, but to honor your own reality. And slowly, the world starts responding, not to the version of you it once demanded, but to the authentic self it never even knew existed. But this process isn't about revenge. It's not about proving your worth to those who once ignored you. That path leads only to bitterness, a performance masquerading as healing. No. True transformation comes when you no longer need to be seen to know you matter. You become your own source of recognition. You stop chasing closure from people who never had the capacity to understand you. Instead, you create new spaces, relationships, communities, even moments within yourself where visibility is not a reward, but a birthright. You stop apologizing for your needs. You stop shrinking to fit into rooms that were never designed to hold your fullness. And in doing so, you change not only your own life, but the emotional landscape of everyone around you. Because when one person decides to stop disappearing, it gives others permission to do the same. This is where presence becomes power. Not power over others, but the power to remain rooted in your truth no matter how loud the world gets. You begin to see that your silence wasn't just absence, it was preparation. You were learning to observe, to feel deeply, to understand the undercurrents that most people miss. And now, with that insight, you have something rare: depth in your empathy, depth in your boundaries, depth in your voice. You're no longer the child waiting to be chosen. You're the adult who chooses themselves again and again in every moment, with every breath. And that choice creates ripples in your relationships, in your creative work, in your presence. Because true presence is magnetic. It doesn't demand attention. It draws it, not from performance, but from alignment. So if you were once the ignored child, I offer you this. Your invisibility was never your fault. But your presence, that's your responsibility now. And it's sacred. It's the offering you bring to the world. Not perfectly, not all at once, but daily. In the way you speak up, in the way you rest, in the way you stop explaining yourself to people who've already decided not to listen. You don't owe the world your silence anymore. What you owe, what you own, is your truth. And that truth, lived fully, becomes a beacon for others still trapped in their old roles, still waiting to be seen. So let me leave you with one final question. If you stopped hiding, what kind of life could you build? Not the life others expect, not the life that keeps you safe, but the life that finally feels like yours. Because you're not invisible anymore. You never were. You were just waiting to return.